Today on episode 89, I'm replaying a previous episode about what to do when your lesson just isn't working. No matter how much time we spend planning a lesson, there will be some that don't work quite how we had anticipated. This is especially true if you're a new teacher because you're still figuring out lesson delivery and pacing, student engagement, and classroom management. So on today's episode, I'm going to cover 5 steps to take when your lesson isn't working out so that you can regroup and correct course.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, where we help new and beginning teachers navigate through those crazy first years of teaching so you can maintain your sanity and personal life. Here's your host, Kim Lepre.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kim Lepre, and this is the podcast for new and beginning teachers who don't want to just survive those first few years, but actually thrive. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate you. A lot of you have been reaching out to me via email, and I've been enjoying reading them and getting to know you. I'm constantly thinking about how we can better serve you guys and make this teaching journey easier. And I wish that I could meet you all and hear more about what's going on in your teaching world. Oh, wait, you know what? There is a way for us to meet at the New Educator Conference. So this episode is brought to you by the New Educator Weekend South in San Diego. From December 6th through 8th, that's this weekend, you guys, the California Teachers Association is holding a conference just for new teachers. So why should you go to this conference that I've been talking so much about? Aside from getting to meet me. First, the registration fee is only $49 if you're a CTA member and $10 if you're a student CTA member. And if you guys remember from previous episodes, this gets you not just your conference sessions, but they also feed you. So we're getting Friday dinner, Saturday breakfast and lunch, and Sunday brunch. I think that's a really awesome deal. That alone, just the food alone, is worth $49, and you get the sessions on top of that. And remember that if you go, you can earn up to 2 units of university credit from Cal State University Chico Department of Education for just $60 a unit. And then on top of that, you can also get up to 15 hours of professional growth credit at no cost. So this is definitely a way for you to get all those extra hours and credit so that you can move up the pay scale. And then I've mentioned this before, but Nicholas Ferroni is going to be keynoting the conference. And if you don't know about him, he was actually named one of the most influential educators in America. He's been on some shows that maybe you've heard of, like The View and on MSNBC. And it's really exciting because he's really inspirational and gets the crowd pumped up. So during this last month before the semester, it's definitely the kind of inspiration that we need as we're trying to just make it across the finish line. So be sure to head over to teachersneedteachers.com/conference to sign up for the upcoming San Diego conference on December 6th through the 8th.
Hi, I'm Heather Monthy from the About the Teen STEM podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
As I mentioned in the introduction, this episode is actually a replay of one that I've done before. I'm currently on a break for the holidays and will be back with new episodes on December 30th. So in the meantime, I am re-releasing my most popular and practical episodes that I think will help you as we wind down the semester. So it's really important that if you're not a subscriber yet, that you go ahead and hit that follow or subscribe button so that you won't miss that first episode back. So today's episode, I wanted to talk to you about what to do when it seems like nothing's going right, nothing's working. And this can be a really familiar feeling because you feel like, you know, I planned my butt off. I had every little transition with how long it was going to take. I had my structured student interactions planned out. And I even had all of the assessments perfectly planned out. And then I look at my scores and wait a minute, they didn't get it. Or even worse, during the lesson, you're sure that this lesson is sequenced in such a way that they're going to understand it. And when you go to look at their work while they're doing individual work, or when you're asking students for answers, you get blank looks because they still don't get it. And you're sitting there wondering, okay, what do I do now? Because I thought this was going to work, but it didn't. So now what? So I have 5 tips for you so that you can best evaluate what went wrong and know how to fix the situation so that it happens less frequently. So the first thing is you don't want to automatically blame the students. I mean, it's a lot easier to blame the students and to point fingers at them when a lesson is not going well. I've actually heard a lot of teachers blame students for their inability to learn the material. So these teachers, they'll complain, the students don't want to learn, and they should want to learn. And it's not my fault that they don't want to learn, and I can't make them learn. I mean, yes, you can't really make them learn necessarily, and they could be unmotivated. But you also have to think about the fact that there might be external factors that are affecting whether or not they're able to learn. Ones that are out of your control and out of their own control. So, we can sit there and say that they're unmotivated, but maybe they're tired. And you're thinking, Kim, I'm tired all the time. But let's say that they just had a new baby brother or sister and they're not used to this thing crying all the time and they didn't get any sleep. I mean, that's real. And remember, these are still kids and you're the adult. Maybe you're saying, Kim, I'm a parent and I had to do that. You're the adult. It's harder on kids. They need more sleep. So that could be something playing in. It could be that they're food insecure and didn't get a meal or they didn't get breakfast. They could have some other trauma happening at home. But regardless of what it is, there are probably other factors that are affecting whether or not they can learn, and just blaming them and saying this lesson didn't work because you guys don't want to learn isn't fair. And it's also not going to solve anything. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that students shouldn't take responsibility for their actions. Maybe they're slouching in their seat and being distracted or distracting and not paying attention to your lesson, and that's why they didn't do well. But, we can't just keep blaming them. That doesn't actually do anything. It's not productive. It doesn't actually solve the fact that they didn't learn the material. Honestly, any student has the ability to learn and thrive in the right environment, especially when they're engaged and when they feel safe and valued. When you blame them, you're not providing those things for them. As cheesy as it sounds, students are just like what Forrest Gump says about life being a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And I like to think of students every single year sort of like a mystery subscription box, because I look forward to my students every year. I know that I have no knowledge of what I'm going to get, and that's part of the fun. Or if you watch Chopped and they have those mystery baskets and we're like, ooh, what kind of interesting things do they have in there? Those are my students. I'm not comparing them to food, but to me, I love the challenge of trying to get to know them and figure out what makes them tick. And I don't fault them when they struggle because I know that they're all at different levels. And so, my mantra when I'm working with a variety of students and, those who are getting it and those who aren't getting it, I just tell them all, you got to start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. And, that was Arthur Ashe who said that. But my point with that is that you can't blame students for where they're at. It's our responsibility as teachers to meet them where they're at and get them where they need to be. So step number 2 is take responsibility. So I mentioned before that as educators, we are the adults. We have the degree and we're making the money. Not a lot of money, but we are making the money. And it's our jobs to teach the students the material and, more importantly, to want them to learn. And I know that some people disagree with me. I will go as far as to say that I want my students to learn more than they want to learn. You can't blame a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 15-year-old if they don't feel like learning? I mean, we can go back and think about the days when we were in school and we just really didn't want to do anything or learn anything. And they're kids, in the same way that some days you just don't want to go to school and teach, but you're the adult. So I went into teaching because I wanted to inspire generations of learners. I wanted them to be responsible citizens, and I wanted them to learn how to be great communicators through reading and writing. I want to make a difference in their lives, as cliche as that sounds, but I want to do that to every student, regardless of their level or motivation. So if you only want to teach motivated students, good luck, because that's not going to happen. You can definitely create an environment where students want to learn, where they're engaged, but you also can't blame them if they don't, because that's just kids, okay? And think about it. As an adult, you have so much power compared to your students. I can change how I teach and how I approach them when they're struggling. But students can't really control the external factors that are keeping them from reaching their potential, meaning things that are out of their control because they're kids. They can't control the fact that their parents are getting a divorce, or that they're being bullied, or that they have no place to do homework. They can't control that. They're kids. I am the adult. So I can decide if I'm going to be empathetic, if I'm going to give them a little extra love and a push when they just want to sit there and slouch in their seat, or I could just sit there and say, fine, it's your education. If you want to fail, you fail. So now not only have I failed them, their home life, their outside life has also failed them because they have no control. So getting back to how to fix this. When things go badly in my class, I actually take responsibility for it right away, because even if I plan my butt off and I feel like I have this lesson, it's going to be so awesome, and my students aren't getting it, that's my fault. If they're unmotivated, I bet my lesson wasn't very engaging. If their eyes are glazing over, or maybe I was talking too much. If they don't understand what they're supposed to do, you know what? My directions weren't clear enough. And I've seen that. When kids don't know what to do and they're just sitting there, or they do things incorrectly, I immediately look at my directions and see what I failed to explain. What assumptions did I make that they should know? So I always just take a look at what I did, because if I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, the kids will be doing what they're supposed to do. So it's really important, especially when you're early on in your career, to take responsibility. It's going to have such an impact on your personal and professional growth. It doesn't mean that you lose face in front of your students and colleagues, and you're not blaming yourself. It's not like, oh no, I'm such a screw up and I did something wrong. What it means is that you are a true educator and you want to work hard to refine your craft. And the only way to improve is to be self-reflective, figure out what you did wrong and how you can do better, but not from a place of negativity and hating yourself and feeling like you're not worth being a teacher, or that you have what it takes to be a teacher, but from a place of wanting to improve. Okay, so the third step is to reevaluate. So this is similar to step number 2 with taking responsibility. So now, if I find myself at a place where I'm just like super frustrated because the kids aren't getting it, I just have to take a step back and look at my pacing guide for the unit. I'll look at each lesson and I'll ask myself, okay, how's that lesson working for me? Did they get it? Should I even bother to move on? Should I reteach in a different way because they didn't get it? So you have to really take a hard look at the lesson that you just gave and do some damage control. So again, I can control my teaching, but I can't force students to understand. I can't control the outcome of my teaching. I can guide my students to these certain skills so they can demonstrate them, but I can't actually make the learning happen in their brain. So I have to focus on what I can change. And remember, you can change the way that you teach but you can't necessarily change the students and just like make them absorb that material. Okay. So students, they're going to come and go. You're going to get a new batch of students every single school year. But if you keep teaching that lesson the same way and it's not going well, that's going to be a problem. And the students aren't going to know that there's something wrong with your lesson. And unless you have someone observing you doing that lesson all the time, the only person who's going to know that the lesson isn't going well is you. So you have to constantly reevaluate and be reflective on how you're doing in the classroom. So what I do is that I look at what and how I've taught as evidence of what did and didn't work. So I have to have like this honest conversation with myself and learn from my mistakes. So if what I'm doing isn't working, then rather than just say, okay, let's try this again, and failing, I step back and regroup. I mean, why should I keep teaching it the exact same way over and over again and expect that the kids are going to get it? And usually what happens when people do that too is they blame the kids. They're like, well, I covered this again and I covered this again and you're still not getting it. It's the students. Well, maybe the way that you're covering it isn't quite working. So let's take a look at it and fix it so that it can be better for next time. And this doesn't mean throw everything out and start all over again. Oh my goodness, no. I don't do that. I just adjust the parts that aren't working. That's all. I mean, it could be as simple as a small tweak in the order that I do things, and that could make a huge difference in comprehension. Or maybe I just need to add one more intermediary step just to make sure that they understand the process, and then they can move on. So for example, right now my students are working on using the funnel method to write introductions. And so when I teach the funnel method, I have the hook, I have the explanation of the topic, and then I have the thesis statement. And the students really struggle with the part in the middle, which is the explanation of the problem and the topic. And so it just dawned on me that I needed to break down what goes in that part even more. Because before I just told them, you want to discuss the topic and the significance and why it matters, but that still wasn't enough. So for example, if the claim that they're supposed to be writing about is that homework should be eliminated completely, they definitely agree that homework should be eliminated, but they can't explain why other than they're too lazy, and that's not really convincing. So that part in there where they're supposed to explain the topic is really difficult for them. So I finally came up with a way to break down what should go into each of those sentences in that middle part, and then the students were able to apply it to different claims. So it was awesome, but I had to, tweak it and do it a little bit differently. I had to reevaluate, and I reevaluate every year and figure out, why aren't they getting this? So let's say in your situation, you gave them an activity or a worksheet that they just didn't understand, and you graded it and you're frustrated because so many of them got C's and D's on them. Well, try giving it back to them and then having them work in pairs or groups and do some error analysis together. Try to rework what they got wrong. Or maybe everyone failed a quiz, and I can tell you this has happened to me. Look at the questions that most of the students answered incorrectly and analyze how the question was worded. And then take a look at the answer choices. Maybe it looks like 2 answers could have been correct, so half the class will pick one while the other half picks the other. Or maybe they just need additional review. Either way, reevaluate when things aren't going right. So the next step is to use something that has worked before. So not only do I reflect on what didn't work, but I also take a look at what does work. Why? Because I have some, basic pedagogical tricks in my bag that I use with a lot of different lessons. And if that worked well with teaching one skill, I can tell you it's probably going to work again with another skill. I mean, think back to even with your student teaching. Think back to a time when you just nailed that lesson and the students were so engaged in the material that they just couldn't forget it. And then think about how you taught that lesson and how can you apply it to this lesson that isn't working. Or alternatively, something that I also do is I'll go to Instagram or Teachers Pay Teachers or Twitter and see how other people are teaching this lesson. I've been known to go to Teachers Pay Teachers and just buy lessons there because other teachers have already figured it out and they've created a better way to teach this lesson. And I am not above that. I don't think that I'm too good to learn from the way that other people teach. And I found some awesome stuff on TPT. So if what I'm doing isn't working as I'm reevaluating, then I'm going to go look somewhere else. The internet is your friend. Now, my last tip for you, and this one may seem obvious, but it's worth mentioning, is to ask for help. You need to seek out your fellow educators. Seek out people in your school who can maybe observe you teaching this lesson. That way you have a set of fresh eyes, someone who's objective, and they can help you figure out where's that disconnect between what you're teaching and the student's ability to learn the material. I mean, we really get in our heads and think that we're doing awesome, and then the kids are looking up with blank faces and they don't know what we're saying. They look at us like, I don't understand anything you just said, even though you just spent 15 minutes talking about it. So having somebody observe is really, really valuable. And it could be scary because you may think that other people are going to judge you or they're going to think you're a bad teacher. You know what? They may think that anyway, but I don't care. I want to be a better teacher. I want their feedback regardless of how they judge me. And maybe you're not in that boat at this point and you're like, I don't want anyone to judge me. But I can tell you it's so freeing when you let go of that and just welcome any and all feedback from your colleagues. Another thing that you can do is also ask them how they teach it and see if you can observe them teaching that same skill. I have found this to be really, really valuable. I've even gone to teachers at other sites to see how they teach a particular standard because I'm fresh out of ideas and I want to see someone who's doing this successfully in action. It's just really powerful to see it in action. Something else that you could also do, as I mentioned before, is you could go to your personal learning network or PLN and ask questions. So whether this is in a Facebook group or an Instagram, or if it's on Twitter, find out how other people are teaching it and maybe even mention how you taught it and ask for feedback on that. I can't tell you how much better of a teacher I am because I sought out the help from my colleagues. I really wasn't that great of a teacher for a while. I'm not going to lie. I would say at least the first 10 to 13 years of teaching, I wasn't very effective. And it wasn't until I had colleagues who gave me feedback and who were my role models, and they really, boosted me up by helping me out. That's when I really started to hit my stride and feel confident as a teacher. Now, here's the thing. You don't have to wait 10 to 12 years to get that. The sooner you get feedback, the faster you're going to get better. And you can't get butthurt about it. You can't take it personally. And I know that sometimes we do because we care so much about what other people think. But I started to realize I care more about the student's ability to learn than what other people think. I didn't care if I was just flying under the radar and no one paid attention to me, as long as I was being an effective teacher, as long as I was changing the lives of these students. So that should be your focus and not what are other people going to think about me. So I hope you found these tips helpful, and I hope that when things seem to all be going wrong, that you can come back to this episode and look at the 5 tips and figure out how you can make them better. And I have a Facebook group. It's the Teachers Need Teachers Facebook group. So if you go to teachersneedteachers.com/FB, like Facebook, then it'll take you to that. Or while you were in Facebook, you could just search for the group Teachers Need Teachers and come in and say hi. It's kind of a quiet group right now. People aren't necessarily asking a lot of questions right now, but if you come in there and say hi, I'll pop in and say hi as well. And I'd love to get to know who my listeners are, so go ahead and head on over there. If you have any questions that you want me to answer in a future episode, please email me at kim@teachersneedteachers.com. Have a fabulous week, you guys.
Thanks for listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. Love this episode? Head over to Apple Podcast or Google Play to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.